You're perfectly set on the target. Everything looks great, and suddenly, you miss the shot. How? Why? Where? The explanation is pretty simple, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of Biathlon University. In the last episode of the Biathlon University series, we talked about how to zero your rifle for the day's conditions, but the underlying theme for that video was consistent practice equals consistent results. Now there's a lot that could have contributed to missing the shot that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Poor trigger squeeze, imperfect sight alignment, bad position and setup, but assuming you executed a consistent performance, there was probably an external factor that affected your shot. These factors can range anywhere from a malfunctioning target to a change in your rifle setup as the result of a crash, for example. But more often than not, the thing that affects your shot is actually the wind. Now, obviously, if your rifle is being pushed way to the side because of a huge gust of wind, that's the reason for your poor shot. But consider this. During zero, there was a slight left wind, so you had to take 2 clicks back to the right. But during the race, the wind switches to now be pushing to the right, and now those 2 clicks you took back to the left to get centered are actually pushing you out of the prone ring. Now, I can't give you a definitive correlation between strength of wind and how many clicks you need to take, but there's a few things that I think about when it comes to taking wind corrections. But first, a word from this video's sponsor. Biathlonstocks.com is a growing biathlon component shop based out of Canada that has partnered with the channel to offer you a discount on all their biathlon accessories. For a limited time only, use the code Brian Halligan at checkout to receive 10% off your purchase of all items in their shop. Last summer, I personally purchased a handful of their rear bolt extenders and highly recommend them for anyone who is having trouble reaching the bolt with their thumb. So click the link in the description below and use the promo code Brian Halligan at checkout for 10% off. So here's my advice when it comes to taking clicks during a race. Taking clicks due to windage is always relative to what the wind flags looked like during zero. During zero, you're trying to zero yourself for the day's conditions. So when taking corrections, you always have to take that into consideration. I've literally seen an athlete have to take 5 clicks during zero because the wind was pushing their group off the center of the target, and then during the race they took 5 more clicks because they didn't realize that they already accounted for the wind earlier in the day. You can pretty well assume that they had a pretty terrible day on the range. So moral of the story is you always take clicks during a race relative to what you had to do during zero. If the wind is up during zero and it's up during the race, you don't need clicks. If it's left during zero but right during the race, you should probably take some clicks. Or the second thing that I remind myself when it comes to taking clicks is that the wind will affect your rifle more than it will affect the bullet. So for that reason, I always consider the closer wind flags when thinking about whether or not I should be taking clicks. Also along these lines, a left and right wind will affect your shot more than a head or tail wind. Like I said, the wind does not affect the bullet very much once it leaves your barrel, but it will affect your rifle as it pushes left or right. The final thing I'll say about taking clicks is to always remember how many clicks you took during a race. In a race that features 2 shooting stages, you may need to take clicks in the first stage, but when you come back to the range for your second shooting, the conditions might be very similar to how you zeroed. So you need to remember that if you took 2 clicks on in your first shooting, you need to take 2 clicks off for your next shooting. All right, I'm going to leave you with one final tip that I tell all my athletes about taking corrections during a race. But first, hit that like button down below if you learned something from this video, and it'll help get this video out to more biathlon fans such as yourself. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button because I'm trying to come out with more biathlon content and put more biathlon videos on YouTube. So if you're a biathlon fan or a biathlete yourself, hit that subscribe button. So the final tip that I tell all my athletes is that if you have 2 misses in a single shooting stage, stop and figure out what is wrong. If you're taking really good shots with good procedure and you're still missing the target, something is up. Whether it's the malfunctioning target that I mentioned earlier, or changing your position that could easily be adjusted by shifting your hips, or maybe the wind picked up and you didn't notice it. A simple pause and reset could be the difference between 5 misses and 2.